Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Gopinath, Radha Gopinath, Shri Radhe. Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadra. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev. Nitai Go Premanandi. Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivajagacharya Stotra Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Abhay Charana Ravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivajagacharya Stotra Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki. Ananta Kori Vaishnava Vrind Ki. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrind Ki. Shri Radha Krishna Gop Gopinath Sham Kund Radha Kund Govardhan Ki. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki. मथुरा धाम की, जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की, गंगा माई की, यमुना माई की, भक्ति देवी की, Srila Prabhupada Translated Book Distribution की, Srila Prabhupada Translated Prasharam Distribution की, Hidai Go Premanandi. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. Oh, glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guru. Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone to this morning's Srimad Bhagavatam class. We are reading from Canto 3, Chapter 24, titled Renunciation of Kardama Muni. Text 44. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nirahankriti nirmamascha nirdvandva samadrik swadrik pratyak prashanda dhirdhira prashanto miri vodadi nirahankriti nirmamascha nirdvandva samadrik swadrik pratyak prashanta dhirdhira prashantor miri vodadi nirahankriti nirmamascha nirdvandva samadrik swadrik pratyak prashanta dhirdhira prasantor miri vodadi. Word for word translation. Nirahankriti, without false ego. Nirmama, without material affection. Cha, and. Nirdvandva, without duality. Samadrik, seeing equality. Swadrik, seeing himself. Pratyak, turned inward. Prashanta, perfectly composed. Dhi, mind. Dhiraha, sober, not disturbed. Prashanta, calmed. Urmihi, whose waves. Eva, like. Udadihi, the ocean. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Thus, he gradually became unaffected by the false ego of material identity and became free from material affection. Undisturbed, equal to everyone, and without duality, he could indeed see himself also. His mind was turned inward and was perfectly calm, like an ocean unagitated by waves. Purport. When one's mind is in full Krishna consciousness and one fully engages in rendering devotional service to the Lord, he becomes just like an ocean unagitated by waves. This very example is also cited in Bhagavad Gita. One should become like the ocean. The ocean is filled by many thousands of rivers, and millions of tons of its water evaporates into clouds. Yet the ocean is the same unagitated ocean. The laws of nature may work, but if one is fixed in devotional service to the lotus feet of the Lord, he is not agitated, for he is introspective. He does not look outside to material nature, but he looks into the spiritual nature of his existence with a sober mind. He simply engages in the service of the Lord. Thus, he realizes his own self without false identification with matter and without affection for material possessions. Such a great devotee is never in trouble with others because he sees everyone from the platform of spiritual understanding. He sees himself and others in the right perspective. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Cham He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatirubhascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityanandam Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. So today's verse, Canto 3, Chapter 24, verse number 44. Thus, he gradually became unaffected by the false ego of material identity and became free from material affection. Undisturbed, equal to everyone, and without duality, he could see himself also. His mind was turned inward and was perfectly calm, like an ocean unagitated by waves. So this chapter is titled Renunciation of Kardama Muni, and we are towards the end of this chapter. There's just 2 more verses left. However, before going into the verse, today is a very auspicious day, as per the Gaudiya Vaishnava calendar. Just so that I get it, I don't leave out anything. Today is Vasant Panchami. It's in Vrindavan, celebrated as the first day of spring. I don't know, for some reason my app's taking a while to load, but it's also the disappearance day of Pundarik Vidyanidhi. The appearance day of Raghunath Das Goswami. The disappearance day of Srimati Vishnu Priya, the wife of Lord Chaitanya. And I'm just thinking my app's loading up, but from memory, I believe the disappearance day of Raghunandan Das appearance. Oh. And the Tirubhav of Shri Ravishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And there's one other occasion today, if anyone knows, from a contemporary Vaishnavas. Saraswati Puja, yes, but something more. Australia Day. Today is the sannyas anniversary of His Holiness Tamal Krishna Maharaj. So today is the day Tamal Krishna Maharaj accepted sannyas in 1972 from Srila Prabhupada. So it's reflecting on this verse. Obviously, the first word in the translation itself is Nira Hankriti, without false ego. So just to recap what's happened in this chapter starts off with Devahuti expressing her lamentation to Kardama Muni, and then Kardama Muni pacifies her, saying that soon Lord Kapila will appear and will dispel her doubts and will actually reinstate her. And following that, Lord Kapila does appear in the womb of Devahuti, and as that's taking place, Lord Brahma and other demigods and other sages come there and offer prayers. And as soon as that happens, Kardama Muni marries off his 9 daughters to the respective sages. And after that, Kardama Muni sets off and offers prayers to Lord Kapila. And Lord Kapila reciprocates with Kardama Muni and blesses him. And in this final section of this chapter is where Kardama Muni sets off on the final stages of his life, where he's taken sannyas. And in the previous verses, Srila Prabhupada also writes, what was the need of him leaving home when the Lord himself has appeared in his house? But as per etiquette and as per following the Vedic culture, and to set an example for all of us, he leaves home, and the final section of this chapter is when he'll attain his goal. So in this verse especially, there's a mention of false ego. And like I said earlier, at some point in the past, if you just tap in false ego on Vedabase, at one point, it's just, the list seems endless. There are so many verses, room conversations, morning walks by Srila Prabhupada, where he establishes this principle. In fact, just this last week when we had His Holiness Janananda Maharaj visit us, he was giving the Sunday feast class, and he said a verse which I'd heard, practically this is one of the most spoken verses in the Gita, but he said a verse, by practice and detachment one can overcome the tribulation of the mind. And I'd heard it, and I'd somehow or the other, in my memory, I'd always recognize practice, because obviously it says we're practicing sadhana bhakti, which is devotional service in practice. But detachment is something that only registered to me in this when Maharaj said it, and it's like, oh, the one has to be detached from the workings of his senses. So in the 18th chapter of this of Bhagavad Gita, there's a beautiful verse that Krishna speaks. The verse is 18.58. Machchita sarva durgani mat prasada tarishashi atache tvam ahankara nashoshasi vinangshashi. If you become conscious of me, you'll pass over all the obstacles of conditioned life by my grace. If, however, you do not work in such consciousness but act through false ego, not hearing me, you will be lost. So, again, there are many other verses in the Gita where Krishna speaks about it. However, in this verse, we'll just reflect on this for a bit. And then later today, we'll discuss a little on some of the personalities that have appearance and disappearances we are celebrating today, or we should be meditating on today, on these lives of these glorious personalities. So, if you become conscious of me, you'll pass over all the obstacles of conditioned life by my grace. If, however, you do not work in such consciousness but act through false ego, not hearing me, you'll be lost. I've been reading this book by Devaki Mataji, The False Ego, Our Constant Companion and Troublemaker. And in this book, she highlights how our false ego, our ahankara, actually chains us to this world. And time again, it causes us great pain. So she's describing in this book, and as Krishna describes here, in this world or in our existence, there are two motivating forces. There are two forces that motivate us to do something, or whatever we do. Krishna, as per the first part of the verse, he says, if you become conscious of me, you'll pass over all the obstacles of conditioned life by my grace. That means if we recognize ourselves as eternal servitors of Krishna or of Krishna's devotees, then we are easily able to overcome anything that's chaining us to this world. However, if we choose to ignore that, which as conditioned souls, Nityabadhas, we do, then we are eternally trapped in this samsara. So, obviously, in this world, everyone is trying to enjoy or trying to... What is this ahankara? What is this false ego? This concept of I and mine. That everything belongs to me, everything's meant for my satisfaction, everything is meant for my pleasure. And that is very deep-rooted in our consciousness, in our chitta. It's... In conditioned life, there are four broad categories of it. One is trying to achieve it through artha, through lustful propensities. So each of us, at least for myself, speaking from a conditioned soul perspective, is we are trying to enjoy something independent of Krishna. So each time there's an opportunity that comes knocking at a door, we ask ourselves, is this something that will give Krishna pleasure, or is this something through which I can satisfy Krishna's senses, or is it solely giving pleasure to me? And if the answer is, if it's giving pleasure to me, then that's actually a lustful propensity. And these can, like I said, come under different, the lust that is spoken in the Shastra, or, that the most grossest form of lust is the attraction between man and woman. However, there are subtleties to it as well, which is described in the Shastra, which we'll expand on it in a bit. So lust, that which is kama, artha, economic development, just expanding enterprises, expanding our network, expanding that which we feel will give us eternal pleasure. Like one of Devamrita Swami says, this material world over-promises and under-delivers. We'll always think something is there which will give us pleasure beyond, what we can even imagine, but however, it falls short. And then comes dharma, religiosity. A lot of us approach God or approach Krishna just to satisfy our desires. His Holiness Bhaktivedanta Swami writes in his book, the Shri Shikshashtaka, which is his reflections on Shikshashtaka, and he writes, a lot of times people, a lot of religions, a lot of traditions around the world are centered around this concept of asking God for bread. And they're truly justifying their needs for it, because if not God, who else will we approach for? However, this concept of God being our auto supplier becomes, again, it puts I in the center. And the final is moksha, liberation. So if I'm suffering today, I want to be liberated from my suffering condition. I want to go to a place where there's actually, it's just complete shanti. There's no one's troubling me. Whatever is causing me pain today, my work, my family, my surroundings, I just want to be in a situation where I'm completely peaceful. Again, that's focused on I. That's the conditioned life. Now, when we gain this knowledge of how Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Aham sarvasya prabho matta sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam bhuta bhava samanvitaha. I'm the source of material and spiritual world. The wise who know this engage in my devotional service. So when we understand that Krishna is the proprietor of everything, then we take to spiritual life. However, at that time too, we have to be very careful. Devaki Mataji writes in this book that spiritual life, Krishna consciousness, should actually bring about a deep transformation in our heart. His Holiness Radha Vinod Swami always describes material knowledge is information and spiritual life is transformation. So we should actually bring about a transformation within our hearts. Over time, we have to work on we have to understand that we have some motives within our heart. So devotional service is actually pure, as described in the second canto of the Bhagavatam. So why Pumsam? Sorry, I'm trying to bring it up. Savai Pumsam Paro Dharmo Yato Bhakti Radhokshaje Ahaituki Apratihata Yayatma Suprasiditi. The supreme occupation, dharma, for all humanity is that by which men can attain to long devotion service unto the transcendental Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted. Ahaituki Apratihata. So, unmotivated and uninterrupted. We'll discuss unmotivated in a bit. At least for myself, at least for us, if we see uninterrupted, is something that we can measure. Just last week, I was speaking to a devotee, and the devotee was saying that they had just recently due to work purposes, they had to go away on a work trip. And I asked him, how was it? He said, everything was good except for I just couldn't focus on my chanting. I just couldn't focus on, my daily practice of Krishna consciousness. It felt like I was, that connection was broken. But now that I'm back, I feel like now I have this greater push to do so. So devotional service, pure devotional service is uninterrupted. So you see in the lives of great devotees, what separates us, a lot of times I used to think, pure devotee, what is this pure devotee? I thought this is more like a rubber stamp on someone. We see this, or Prabhu, this devotee is a pure devotee. It's that they're engaging in pure devotional service. And that pure devotional service is unmotivated and uninterrupted. Now, obviously, unmotivated is that's something internal. We can't really see it externally. We don't walk around with a badge my name, unmotivated and uninterrupted devotional service. We don't, put that on our head, walking around advertising ourselves. But uninterrupted, yes, we do see. Um, some devotee, whether hail or snow, you'll see them at the morning program. For example, I think a few weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, a devotee had posted it on WhatsApp. And I'm sure I'll get crucified for this, but he put a photo of Prem Sagar Prabhu in Mayapur attending Mangala Arati. And when he said that, it just occurred to me, Prem Sagar Prabhu is doing the same thing what he does here. He's doing it in Mayapur and wherever he goes. So uninterrupted. That means even though it seems to be a holiday, but not ever losing touch with uninterrupted devotional service. Similarly, we see, lives of great devotees. That's what separates them. Unmotivated. Now, this can be a bit tricky because it is said in the Bhagavatam, whether one be akama, sarvakama, mokshakama tarati, tivrena bhakti yogena. What's the last bit? Jitam purusham pradhan. So whether one be full of material desire, no material desires, one should worship the Supreme Lord. So when we come to devotional service, obviously there are some motives. But over time, we have to work towards transforming those motives and coming to the platform of pure devotional service. Now, obviously, as the other day, we had the good fortune of hearing from Nitai Sevani Mataji, and she was saying that, yes, these principles, these lifestyles are described in the pages of Bhagavad Gita, of Bhagavatam. They're there for us to constantly hear and to remind us. So even, we hear of pure devotional service and we feel, light years away from it, but it's there. The more we constantly hear, the more we'll be reminded of it and the more we'll be purified. So our false ego, right? We discussed that. So when we come, even when Mataji writes in this book, a lot of times when we take to Krishna consciousness or we take to bhakti, and obviously we're engaging in some services. Now, there are some skills that are natural to us, or at least as per our psychophysical nature we can engage in, and that gives us pleasure. And a lot of times we say, we come and we take on the services and we feel, a sense of achievement in them. And she's saying that's still considered to be subtle sense gratification. We may want to do a service which we are good at, and because we know if we do it, there'll be less room for us being corrected. There'll be less, no one would, we'll be glorified for it, and there'll be not much purification, which means, again, correction. Once I was listening to a very senior disciple of His Holiness Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and she was saying she due to some scheduling challenges, she was asked to cook for Maharaj. So she was cooking for Maharaj, and every day Maharaj would, offer her some feedback. This is, this should be done this way, this should be done that way. After like 4 or 5 days, she just told Gurudev, I'm not a cook. And he said, then learn to become one. And she said, but it's just, I'm not able, it's just not my forte or my service. He's like, then take this as your service and try to become one. And she said later on that Maharaj was trying to bring her to the platform pure devotional service because of our conditioning, there's a chance for us to just slip into a comfort zone. It just happens from time and time again that, if I am more inclined to do one type of service, then that'll naturally put me into my comfort zone. But time and time again, we should try to come out of our comfort zone because that'll help us get further purified. So we have to question our motive. So it's a broad spectrum. On one end, is pure devotional service, which is ahaituki apratihata, and on one end is our conditioned nature, and in the middle is a myriad of different, spectrums of where we fall. So 2 days ago, when Mritai Sevani Mataji was speaking on a verse from Bhagavad Gita chapter 12, and she was saying what qualities endear us to Krishna. And I'll just repeat them because they're so. Krishna speaks about them, and it's to our benefit. And and she explained each of them in such detail that those that were not here, or those that even were here, should go back and listen to them. It is Bhagavad Gita chapter 12, verse number 13 to 14. Adveshta sarva bhutanam maitra karuna evacha nirmamo nirahankara samadukha sukha shami. Santushta satatam yogi yatatma didanischayaha mai arpita manobodhi yomad bhakta same priyaha. One who is not envious but is a kind friend to all living entities, who does not think himself a proprietor and is free from false ego, who is equal in both happiness and distress, who is tolerant, always satisfied, self-control, and engaged in devotional service with determination. His mind and intelligence fixed on me, such a devotee of mine is very dear to me. So these are the qualities that we should cultivate, because these endear us to Krishna. Now, false ego, like I said, can entrap us. And a lot of times we'll be doing, in the name of devotional service, we may be performing services, but if we're not being introspective on what our motivations are, then we'll be, the fruit, we won't be able to relish the fruit of devotional service. We'll be able to relish the fruit or the bitter fruits of Prabhupada writes in Chaitanya Charitamrita, lava, pratish, puja, and pratishtaha. That means fame, adoration, and worship. In fact, just yesterday I was hearing a class by Radha Vinod Swami on this same topic, and he was describing the life of Bharat Maharaj, and he was saying how conscious should we be, and he was describing the example of Bharat Maharaj, in which he said, Bharat Maharaj is the son of Rishabdev in the 5th canto. It talked about, and he said, Bharat Maharaj had renounced this whole world. In fact, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, his renunciation was so, it was lauded for, and Prabhupada writes in the purport, just as one walks away after passing stool, that's how Bharat Maharaj renounced his whole kingdom and his attachments. So that's how one may just walk away after performing some, answering nature's call. To that extent, Bharat Maharaj was just able to walk away from his kingdom, his family, and his attachments. And when he was in the forest, he was performing his sadhana, his puja. He was at the stage of bhava. At that very moment, he sees a deer who's about to cross the Gandaki river, and because of some unfortunate circumstance, she actually jumps across the river, but due to the circumstances described in the Bhagavatam, she's had a miscarriage, and the child that's in her womb falls into the river. And Bharat Maharaj, because of his deep compassion, as being a devotee of the Lord, takes to the baby deer, and starts looking after her. And Radha Maharaj describes, he was doing everything that a compassionate person would do. However, that was, over time, he neglected his sadhana, he neglected his puja and his absorption in the Lord. And Maharaj describes that happened primarily because he had no association. So, for us, we are fortunate to be surrounded with devotees. And Radha Maharaj describing, if we think we can become Krishna conscious without the association devotees, then we are in Maya, we are in illusion. So we need the association devotees to always keep us on track. This one example that I've heard, which has always stayed with me, and it's such a beautiful example that was given by His Holiness Lokanath Swami. Once Lokanath Swami was asked by a devotee. This devotee was helping out Lokanath Maharaj with some translation work. And Maharaj, and as the project came to an end, this devotee was leaving, and this devotee asked Maharaj, Maharaj, what is one piece of advice that you can give me? I'm quite new, or at least I have all these years ahead, materially speaking, in my life. And what's one thing that can help me stay fixed on the path of devotional service and to the service of my Guru and Vaishnavas? And Maharaj told him, I'm pretty sure everyone here know of Kumbh Mela. So every year there's a Kumbh Mela that happens in Allahabad or in Haridwar. I don't know the exact location. But every 12 years there's a Maha Kumbh Mela. So every year there is a gathering of people, but every 12 years that gathering expands to even a larger number. And Maharaj told him that when you're participating in the Kumbh Mela, obviously you're walking towards the ocean and waiting for that appropriate time to come for you to take a dip. And he said, as you're walking, you'll see, as you're walking, there are people around you, and as the time comes closer and closer, that there are more and more people that you're surrounded by. He's like, when that time comes, even if you have the slightest doubt, should I take a dip or not, he won't be left with a choice, rather than, because the crowd, the force of people will just push you to take a dip in the ocean to receive the blessings from it. So similarly, he said that we should, Prabhupada always uses the term being packed up in the association devotees. So he said that even if in our spiritual life there may be occasions where we may be laxed, or due to some difficulty we are having some challenges, if we're surrounded with devotees will wake us up and tell us, what are you doing? Come. There was once, I'm trying to remember the name of this Maharaj, but this Maharaj was saying that he was with his Holiness Jayapataka Maharaj, and they were in Tirupati. And he said that this Maharaj, I can't remember my name, please forgive me for this, but this Maharaj had just come through a 48-hour journey to Tirupati, just landed in Tirupati. It was maybe 1 or 2 a.m. or something like that. And this devotee had just come, this Maharaj had just come, and had just lied down just for just to take some rest. And just half an hour later, there's loud, banging on the door, like. But he started someone knocking on the door with such intensity, and Maharaj was like, "Who's this person?" He opens the door, and it is his own Maharaj. And as soon as Maharaj opened the door, Jayapataka Maharaj was like, "Maharaj, let's go. We have to go see Lord Balaji." And this Maharaj looked at the watch. He said, "It's 2:45. He said, "Yes, this is the best time to see Lord Balaji. You have to come now." I said, "Maharaj, I'm not ready, and he said, "No, this is the right time. I'll wait for you for 5 minutes. Get ready." And Maharaj got ready in 5 minutes. And they went, and I believe the administrators or whoever were overseeing the temple were very favorable to ISKCON and to Jayapataka Maharaj, and so somehow or the other, this Maharaj and Jayapataka Maharaj were able to take darshan of Lord Balaji for 2 minutes. Because there's constantly a line that there's a queue there, so you have to keep moving. So they were able to have darshan of it for 2 minutes. And as soon as Maharaj came to his room, And he just was in such ecstasy he couldn't even sleep. He just was thinking how merciful the Lord was, and most important, how merciful Lord and Jayapataka Maharaj and devotees were in for him to take this opportunity to go see Lord Balaji. So similarly, even for us, we have to come to appreciate the value of sadhu sangha, and that's what will keep us. There's a beautiful verse in the Nectar of Instruction. I forget the Sanskrit of it, but the last bit of it, even when one takes to devotional service, one will be ultimately dragged to perfection. So that's to our glory here, or to our credit, that somehow or the other, the only thing that we need to do is to just keep with the process. And if we do so, then we'll be able to cross through and go on the other side where we'll be able to serve the Lord. So I'll just take a couple of minutes here just to speak on the personalities today. I've gone over time here. But one of them is Raghunath Das Goswami. And Raghunath Das Goswami's life is most celebrated. We hear of it. He came from a very wealthy family. His fathers were Hiranya and Govardhan Majumdar. And it is said that his wealth or his opulence equaled that of Indra. And obviously his wife was as beautiful as Sachi Devi, but even though he was surrounded by such opulence, he was able to give up his attachment and serve Lord Chaitanya. He was so expert in it is said that from his very childhood he was attached to Lord Chaitanya because his family priest Yadunandan Acharya would always come and speak the glories of Lord Chaitanya, and he had also had the association of Haridas Thakur and Advaita Acharya. So when he would try and break away from his surroundings and go to see Lord Chaitanya told him, "Don't be a madman. Look after your duties nicely, and be internally attached to Krishna." So much so that later on, when there was a family dispute, or where his uncle and his father was put into some difficulty by the government, he was able to rescue them with such expert skills of his of using diplomacy. And later on, he had joined Lord Chaitanya's party, and Lord Chaitanya had put him under the care of Swarup Damodar. So much so that later on, after the passing away of Lord Chaitanya, he actually, what we find, in terms of the pastime of Lord Chaitanya that were transcribed by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami and Vrindavan Das Thakur were actually from the diaries of Raghunath Das Goswami and Swarup Damodar. So the example of Raghunath Das Goswami is an ideal one for us Grihasthas, and also in those in the renounced order, because he exhibited both of these qualities befitting how one should act in Krishna consciousness. So that's Raghunath Das Goswami. There's also Raghunandan Das Thakur. If you look up on the Vaishnava calendar, there's a nice story of him, how when he was his simplicity, Bhakti Vinod Thakur says, Saralta hi Vaishnava. The simplicity, Vaishnava is decorated with this quality of simplicity. So much so that when he was a little boy, his father Mukunda Datta, or Mukunda, I can't remember. I'll look it up. He had to attend to some duty, so he asked Raghunandan to offer, look after the deity by offering bhoga and, to make the offerings to the deity. So much so that he was given this opportunity, and when he offered it to the deity, when he put the plate from the deity, he would cry in front of the deity to please accept the offering. And the deity was so touched by Raghunandan's devotion that the deity accepted the offering. And later on, when his father came and he said, "Where is the prasad from today?" And he said, "Oh, the deity ate it all." Radha Gopinath ate it all. And he said, okay. Then next day when he asked Raghunandan to do the same, he said, you do the offering and I'll watch behind the curtain. And when he was watching behind the curtain, he saw that the Lord, because of the pure love that the boy had, accepted the offering. He actually fell, with prostrated obeisances in front of Raghunandan Das, and he said, me being a Brahmana, well versed in all of the Vedic scriptures, wasn't able to grasp the essence of it all. And you are my guru from today onwards. And today, even if it is said that you go to this temple, you'll see the deity of Gopal having a half laddu in his hand, because that's when the father of this boy tried to hold his hand when the Lord was trying to honor that laddu. So we see examples of such personalities, and like I said, even though when we read about them, we feel diametrically opposed to what their standard of devotional services. One thing we can do is to pray to them today, at least ask them for their mercy. Lord Chaitanya tells Raghunath Das Goswami that it's by Krishna's mercy alone that you've been saved from this materialistic way of life. So when we look at ourselves, we just understand that on our own we have no qualification, but we are here by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and our acharyas, and somehow or the other, it's by their mercy that we are having this opportunity to serve. So we should be grateful to them. And then, like I said, on days like these, where these personalities are more, just freely pouring mercy on us, we should be asking them, even for the slightest drop of devotion that they have, for us to be able to relish and to be able to serve our acharyas, Srila Prabhupada and Radha Gopinath. So I've gone over time here. I'll end here if someone maybe has just one question or comment today. Yes, Prabhu. Inwards. Yep.
So my question is, Prabhu, I'm just wondering, if he saw Paramatma inside him, was he actually tossing around the three features of the Lord, namely Paramatma, Brahman, and the personality of the Bhagwan teaching? So was he actually, was he constantly tossing around all these three features? But in one shloka it's mentioned that he was actually meditating on the Supreme Personality of God. Now it's actually mentioned that he actually turned his mind inwards. So I was just wondering, and also at one place it's mentioned that he retired in forest, and he was actually traveling all around the surface without any association.
Yeah, so if you look at this canto, the last chapter, I believe, or maybe second last chapter. The last chapter of this canto, it's called The Activities of Kapila. So we'll see exactly what was Lord Kapila, activities of Kapila, but then there's also activities of Kardama Muni that's been described there. So turning inwards, what that actually refers to is a devotee he becomes introspective. There's introspection on the part of the devotee, as we were describing earlier. It's not, and one opportunity that we get, and that's it. Devaki Mati writes in this book, I'll just read it here. Krishna gives us his choice at every moment in our life. Every day, he places us in testing situations, prompting us to make that choice again. The choice of whether we're overcome by a false ego and don't listen, or we actually turn towards Krishna. In those times, when we are conscious of Krishna, in those moments, we pass over the obstacles of conditioned life. In the junctures where we act from false ego, we find ourselves lost and confused. In this way, moment by moment, we can gradually transform our motivating force, taking advantage of the small steps that can be taken in our daily life. Thus, the goal of pure devotional service stands as a target, and we'll always remain hopeful of achieving it one day by the mercy of the Lord and His devotees. And then I'll repeat, she just says the last sentence. Along the way, we may oftentimes find ourselves overcome by Maya. However, with resolute determination, we will have to pick ourselves back up and once again make the choice of adding Krishna into this picture. So, the devotee becomes introspective whenever even the slightest, Bhaktivedanta Swami writes that if we are not engaged in constant devotional service, then there's every chance for us to fall into the patterns of society. So we may see something and disguise it as pure devotional service. For example, when I was saying earlier that example that if we fall into our comfort zone or what we like to do, which, like I said, akama, sarvakama, mokshakama, authority, whatever desires, in whatever way we, what devotee was saying is that devotees are, very expert. They just say, add Krishna into your life. Oh, Prabhu, it's all okay. Just add Krishna into your life. Just add Krishna. But, you have to keep adding Krishna. It's not that you add Krishna and that's it. Today I'm doing this and just add 10 minutes of Krishna conscious activity in your life and that's it. It doesn't stop there. That's the beginning, but it shouldn't end there. So if we don't, over time, if we don't, try to strive towards pure devotional service, then our false ego there's something there that's actually stopping us from, coming into that. So in that way, devotee is introspective and understanding that, am I really, is it me in the center or is it for Krishna? Like how Radha Maharaj was describing the life of Bharat Maharaj, that everything that he could have been doing, if it was done with the connection or with, if his sadhana and his seva and puja, everything was done and this was, all of these activities were added onto, and then it would have come under devotional service. But if it didn't, and that's why he actually fell away from it. So that's the point of even Kardama Muni here. It says that, clearly his mind turned inward and was perfectly calm like an ocean unagitated by waves. So introspection is the key. And to the extent that we are willing to do this internal work, to that extent, we won't be affected by this world. So similarly, we see with Kardama Muni, the example is given, and Srila Prabhupada writes, if you'll read the purports of those verses, that for us, going into the forest, may not be the option now, but we actually take to full-time devotional service. That's why once I was hearing, so in the Radha Swami also speaking to a group of devotees in Chapari or somewhere, where after a certain age, he tells those devotees, you need to now take to full-time devotional service, because if not, then you'll be entangled in things which you may say it as devotional service, but actually it's not pure devotional service. It still falls under Karma Mishra Bhakti. Okay. Thank you. All right, we'll end here. Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam.